All right, this is my short, possibly longer response to the discussion I had with NonCompete last night. So in some areas, we were definitely talking past each other, and I will shoulder some of the blame for that. He didn't seem to be understanding my argument, and I certainly could have outlined it more clearly. In my defense, I didn't think we were going to be talking about intersectionality at all, and I had prepared for basically a different conversation. So I'll start by apologizing for seeming to imply that people should stop complaining about their victimhood. People should stand up for injustices and make others aware. But that kind of got lost in my messaging, which I'll explain as we go. So here's a quote from Zero Books that explains my position a little more clearly. Intersectionality starts from a faulty premise, that politics are downstream from culture, and hence they aim their political interventions not at changing policies or institutions, but at changing attitudes and cultural values. Cultural change arises out of material changes rather than changes within its own discourse. This is the point I was trying to make. Intersectionality doesn't see the world as a set of real relations between people, institutions, laws, and consumer goods, but rather conceives of the world as being made up of independent individuals who are themselves fully determined by the ideas in their head. This leads them to aim at changing those ideas, or, if that's impossible, aim at getting rid of the bad people who hold those ideas. This is why their weapons of choice are shame and reputation destruction, instead of, union organizing, for example. So this is kind of the point I was making about how capitalism is the base from which the cultural superstructure develops and is reproduced, including all of the oppressions. So while we're all fighting the same enemies, their approach is intrinsically backwards. It simply can't create the results we want. That's why I'm critiquing intersectionality. Again, it's a tool, but alone it won't get us where we need to go because it has us thinking about the problem in the wrong way. This gets to the other point I was failing to make clear. Intersectionality steers people towards liberalism and away from class politics by encouraging us to look inwards and examine one's identity through various intersections of oppression they experience. So by emphasizing the internal differences over hegemonic structures and having complex, at times contradictory recommendations, which they do, it can create paralysis. This ties into the other confusion that American Johnson was having with me, seeming to think I was conflating liberal intersectionality with leftist intersectionality. But I was not. My point was that intersectionality itself has characteristics that inherently trends toward liberalism. It's like Sisyphus pushing a rock uphill. You can go that way, but the weight of that rock is going to push you back down towards liberalism because, like I just said, intersectionality emphasizes internal differences over hegemonic structures. Marxism does the opposite. That's why we need Marxism to be the thrust of our politics. Intersectionality can fill the gaps, but it's not going to lead us where we need to go. So while intersectionality, of course, addresses the need to end capitalism, at least pays lip service to it, but its cultural approach is ass backwards, and it's not going to get us there. This is what I was failing to explain to American Johnson, and I apologize for that. As for the using of SJW clip reels, there's no reason why the alt-right should have a monopoly on using them and talking about it as if it's an issue. If nothing else, it's an issue for the left because it's a bad use of our time energy. And not only is it a bad use, it's clearly counterproductive. And for some people, boy howdy, it's a lot of energy. And I agree that at the same time, we shouldn't be doing, the opposite and only focusing on the problem of vampiric SJWs on the left. But then at the same time, we have to come to terms with the fact that this phenomenon really does exist and to the detriment of our end goals. So when I'm talking about things like identity grifters, I'm not only talking about people trying to profit socially off of identity categories. I'm also talking about the disingenuous, bad faith readings of arguments they don't like, and playing up everyone who disagrees with them as Brocialists, Nazis. This gets into the purity tests and gatekeeping that I see as toxic behaviors. They're clearly more prevalent than American Johnson seems to think. I mean, people are told they're not allowed to listen to PewDiePie or leftist YouTubers like Vosh because someone didn't like their language one time. It's just plainly toxic, and it's going to hurt us more than it's going to help us. And while there isn't a direct link between this bad faith behavior and intersectionality, you can get there. But identity grifting and this vampiric behavior is a consequence of focusing on internal struggles over hegemonic systems. And NonCompete compared my characterization of victimhood with the victimhood mentality as capitalists define it. I don't really see it that way, and I think that's kind of an unfair comparison. Victimhood is a problem for the same reason that fascists rely on. It gives them justification for bad behavior. A requirement for fascism is to see themselves as an oppressed minority of the superior class, whether it's by the Jews, women, or the degenerates. As for Americans' issue with my video, the reason it seems like I'm hesitant to accept, good faith criticism, or that I'm against looking weak, is that I reject that most of it is done in good faith at all. I totally agree that it makes us stronger to admit when we're wrong, which I even did during the discussion, if you remember. But as for bad faith actors on the left, look no further than the YouTube live chat during our conversation, which I didn't see until after. This proves my point in spades, with a torrent of purposeful misreading of my words and just plain not hearing what I actually said, and tagging on to me absurd positions that I don't hold and I never gave any evidence that I hold, especially in this discussion. Constantly accusing me of being a secret Nazbol, racist, or alt-right edgelord anytime I mounted the slightest critique of shallow wokeness. As you'll see clearly, they get very defensive anytime someone critiques their strategies and behavior. So let's get into it. Here's a few lines here that I picked directly from the chat. He's like, I'm using racism to convert. We can't reach people by throwing people under the bus. That's a useless strategy. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that. Just because you want to reach someone, you don't have to stoop to their level. Yeah, I didn't say to do that either. I don't say act like a racist person to get to a racist person. Right, but this still doesn't cancel intersectionality. I never said to cancel intersectionality. I said it's a tool that we should use. You can speak to those people without discrediting anyone else's struggle. Yeah, I agree. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't call out racism because capitalism is more important. Yeah, that's not what I said either. You can call out racism. In fact, do call out racism. What the fuck are these people thinking? Sounds like Nazbol gang. Okay? He probably thinks Sanders is an SJW. This is a great example because I use Sanders as an example of the anti-SJW. If this commenter had actually listened, but clearly they did not. Okay, commenter says, the IWW was so successful until its destruction by the US government because it was intersectional, interracial, and all genders were welcome. No shit, that's my point. It welcomed everyone in the working class as equals. That's what we need to do. This dude wants to ignore race and be racist at the same time. He's just racist. Basically, he's saying, people of color, wait your turn, you're rocking the boat too much. Same shit as during the civil rights movement. Yeah, none of those things I said, you fucking idiots. Yes, this dude just wants to keep the racial hierarchy. Where do you get that from? Pretty sure Swoletariat just got mad he can't say the N-word. How? How are you sure of that? He's just gonna say some dumb racist sexist shit next. Okay, this is what I'm dealing with so far. Good faith people here. This is what we're talking about. It seems like dude is white-splaining how people of color should react to racism and oppression. So people kept insinuating I'm policing their speech and actions, and so was American Johnson here, which caught me off guard because it's why I didn't give a good answer. He was asking me to defend a position I don't hold. Fight those fights, but they have to be understood within the logic of capitalism or we won't get anywhere. That's my point. I'm not saying shut up, don't complain. I'm saying don't pretend to be a victim and do it for social capital points, and also make sure you contextualize these issues within the context of capitalism and Marxist critique. Okay, quote here. And Peter critiques the incentives themselves, not individuals. So did I, if you just fucking listened. Okay, marginalized communities are playing victim and they need to calm down. Nope, that's the opposite of what I said. He did say earlier that capitalism would solve other forms of oppression. No, I didn't. Getting rid of capitalism would not fix all intersectional oppression. I literally said that already. This dude just doesn't understand that oppressed people have reasons to be pissed off. Yes, I do fucking listen. Okay, here's a quote from Lenin that someone posted, supposedly, I guess, to debunk me somehow. Our movement is the tribune of people who fight every manifestation of oppression no matter where it is found to demonstrate the commitment to liberate all sectors of society. Okay, so where did I say anything to give you the impression that I would disagree with that statement? Jesus Christ. Okay, he's being a contrarian asshole. There's actually psychological phenomenon where victims become stuck in a cycle of victimhood. I've been there. Okay, I am mortified that you or anyone else has ever had to go through anything like that. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about real suffering and victimhood. I'm talking about victimhood culture and its performance. You know, it's not my fault that people on the left conflate victimhood culture, which is a real phenomenon described by moral philosopher Jonathan Haidt, and the actual victimization of somebody or a people by an oppressor or system of oppression. You know, liberals aren't all useless. Sometimes they have valuable things to say. We have to defeat supremacy in ourselves. At the same time, we defeat it in the world. A white dude, myself included, can't in good faith say race isn't an issue we need to address. Here's a perfect example of how intersectionality reverses the order of how we need to fight by emphasizing and fixating on changing culture instead of material conditions, which this commenter has made the mistake of doing. Thanks for the comment to help explain my point. The Black Panthers were joining up with poor whites towards the end, and that was awesome. Yeah, that's what I'm advocating for. The Black Panther struggle was rooted in class consciousness. More of that. This is the kind of consciousness I am advocating for. The Black Panthers are a perfect model. Maybe instead of stop complaining about your victimhood, just say disingenuous social capital clout gaming is crap. That is my message. I'm not saying don't complain about your victimhood. I'm saying don't let it control your life and don't seek validation through disingenuous identity grifting. So at some point during our discussion, I talk about being corrected for accidentally one time saying the blacks instead of black people. Here are some of the responses. Now, some of you right now, if you're wise, might be drawing parallels immediately between what happened with Liam Neeson, having just thrown out an admission out there to prove a point about how one time he had thought some racist thoughts and then felt guilty about them after. Did he get credit for admitting he had thought something bad and had subsequently come to denounce those bad racist thoughts? No, of course not, because once you've thought a bad racist thought once, you are, or made a mistake even, you're canceled. This is exactly what I'm talking about, which American Johnson doesn't seem to see. The vampire cancel culture does not leave room for improvement or forgiveness or even accidents. And this is toxic behavior, and this is why the left needs to be aware of it and discourage it. Don't blame movements against capital for capital's crimes. This is shit. I'm not. Fucking listen. One good commenter said, recognizing that racism goes together with capitalism isn't intersectionality, it's basic understanding of capitalism since the 19th century. Yes, this was my point about learning Marx. You don't need to know a damn thing about race, sex, or gender theory or intersectionality to understand the need for solidarity, or how capitalism seeks out and reproduces exploited classes. All of this you get from learning Marxist theory. Intersectionality can add to it, sure, but it's absurd to think that you can't have solidarity between different categories of oppressed people without intersectionality, or that Marxism can't do it alone. Of course it can. It's very well equipped. All right, that's enough for now. This live chat is exactly why people like me use words like vampires and identity grifters to describe the disingenuous and blatantly bad faith behavior coming out of the shallow woke left. American Johnson has already bought into wokeness and intersectionality, and that's fine. He's deep in it. So from his perspective, most of his videos don't receive this vitriol because he's largely confirming their worldview. So I guess I completely understand why he would view the criticisms he sometimes gets as being in good faith, because he's not a victim of these vitriolic Twitter mobs and dog piles. So that's the pool that American is swimming in. But as soon as someone comes in to disturb the water with a cannonball, critiquing the ideology as insufficient or an occasional distraction, it's only then that the true nature of the vampires really comes out. You don't get to see it until a certain threshold of stirring the hornet's nest has been met. Just notice how eager the commenters were to paint me in the worst possible light. He's a racist, a Nazbol, an ableist, all with no fucking evidence whatsoever. There were others in the chat who had, of course, more good faith critiques and questions, a lot of which I accept mostly because I communicated many of my points fairly poorly. And yeah, maybe you can say something about the medium of the live chat itself being conducive to this type of behavior, but I'm not so sold on that. I think basically this chat reveals what I'm talking about. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree in the comments, and I'll see you guys with a real video coming up soon. Give me a thumbs up if you like the video. Give me a thumbs down if you think material problems are solved with cultural solutions. All right, see you next time, guys. All right, see you next time, guys. All right, see